Everyone talks about Emmett Till, the black teenage boy who lost his life after he allegedly whistled at a white woman in Mississippi in 1955. But what is less talked about is Willie James Howard, another black teen, who died in a similar way more than a decade before Emmett Till's tragic death. What happened to Willie barely attracted any media attention. In 1943, Willie worked at Van Priest's dime store in Live Oak, Florida, where he swept floors. He was a nice kid that everyone called Giddy Boy. It was this kind-hearted nature that led to him to give a Christmas card to one of his co-workers, a 15-year-old white cashier named Cynthia Goff. She was offended by Willie's gesture and told her father, who was a former state Florida representative and also the postmaster in Live Oak. When Willie learned that he had offended her, he tried to explain himself and wrote a note to Cynthia. This only made things worse. The fact that Willie chose to be nice to this girl and express interest in her will lead to his tragic death. On January 2nd, 1944, the girl's father, Phil Goff, and two other white men came to Willie's home and asked for him. Willie's mother tried to fight them off, but they pulled a weapon on her and dragged Willie away and drove off with him. They then picked up Willie's father, James Howard, from his job and took them both to an embankment on the Swanee River. They made Willie admit that he wrote the note to the girl and then bound his hands and feet with rope. When Willie's father tried to speak, they pointed their weapons at him and told him to remain quiet. They then made Willie's father remove his son from the car and stand next to him on the riverbank. Willie was crying as the girl's father asked Willie if he understood what the penalty for his crime was. Willie sobbed and said that he did. It was at that moment that Willie's father knew that he could not save his son. He told Willie that he couldn't do anything for him. The girl's father pointed his weapon at Willie and told him he could take what was in the weapon or what was in the river. Willie chose the river and stepped back and fell over the edge and into the river. Willie was never seen again. The three white men then took Willie's father back to work. Later that evening, they went to the sheriff to give their version of events as to what happened. They said that they took Willie from his home to have his father punish him for the offensive note he wrote. They tied Willie's hands and feet only to prevent him from trying to run away from the whipping that he deserved. They said that Willie refused to be humiliated by anyone, including his own father, and that he said that he'd rather die, and Willie jumped into the river instead of being whipped by his father. Willie's father, James Howard, he was made to sign this statement saying that he agreed to this version of events. Willie's family had to sell their house and move to Orlando, Florida. Willie's case caught the attention of Florida NAACP leader Harry T. Moore. Harry grew up with Willie's mother. Before I finish this story, let me tell you a little bit about Harry T. Moore. He was actually the first civil rights leader to be assassinated for his activism during the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s. Members of the Klan took both Harry and his wife's life in 1951. They are the only husband and wife to lose their lives for the movement. Harry contacted the National NAACP office to alert them of what happened to Willie. To his surprise, Thurgood Marshall was already working on the case. Thurgood Marshall lobbied the governor for an investigation into what happened. He wrote the governor and said that Willie's father was willing to testify that he was threatened to sign their statement. On May 8, 1944, the state of Florida convened a grand jury to look into the incident. Willie's father testified about what happened, but despite Willie's father testifying, the grand jury refused to indict the three men. No one was ever charged. Willie James Howard was just one of the more than 4,000 black people that were lynched between the end of the Civil War and the end of World War II. Many lynchings were carried out with the consent and sometimes the participation of the local police. Jim Crow was not only about segregation and second-class citizenship. It also deputized and immunized whites who served as its unofficial policemen to enforce the racial order. Jim Crow blurred the line between formal and informal policing. The police were intertwined with racial terror. In order to gain maximum control over black people, it was essential for terror to become law, because the law needed racial terror and racial terror needed the law. Willie James Howard, Emmett Till, and so many more suffered under this system decades ago. And sadly, black people are still suffering this same old misery of racial injustice.